I'd like to preface this video by saying I do not work for Gaijin or Darkflow and have no idea what is going to be in the next Enlisted update, and this is simply a prediction and based off of my own ideas for a Pacific War campaign. With the last Enlisted update basically confirming that we were going to get a Pacific War campaign from the new information about sword attack speed, which more or less confirmed katanas were going to come, and the Guadalcanal mini-map that was leaked in the map editor, we've basically been confirmed now that we're going to get a Pacific campaign in the next update. So here are some of my ideas for weapons, vehicles, and new features that we might see in a Pacific War campaign set in Guadalcanal and Enlisted. The Battle of Guadalcanal happened between summer and winter of 1942 to 1943, which is around the same time as the Tunisian campaign that we already have in game. So it's very likely that we'll see a lot of repeat equipment from the Americans within the new campaign, such as the 1917 Enfield, the 1903 Springfield, the Garand, the M1 Carbine, the M1941 Johnson. So these will be weapons that we're pretty used to. One idea that I have for a weapon we could potentially see as either a gold order or as a new weapon in this campaign would be the Krag Jorgensen rifle, which is out of service by this point after the First World War, but it was used pretty heavily in the Philippine campaign and in the early war by reserve troops, so we could potentially see that as a new weapon. Additionally, for weapons that we might see are new, well, one of them's already in the game, we could see the Ressing series machine guns come, because during the Battle of Guadalcanal, the Marine Corps was mostly equipped with Ressings, whereas the Army had Thompsons. So we may see the M50 and M55 Ressings come to the game as regular Silver Order weapons instead of as a premium squad weapon. Additionally, since we are going to have the Americans in a campaign, it's very obvious that we're going to have Thompsons too, and we'll probably see all the variants of the Thompson we already have in game. In addition, we might also see an M21/28 Thompson with a forward grip and a 50-round drum mag come to the game, as these were still in service with the Seabees and the Marines at the start of the war. And as for American machine guns, we'll probably get the M19 18 bar without a forward grip, and the M19A1 with the forward grip, the first one that you get in the Normandy campaign. Both of these were pretty well issued within both the Marines and the Army during this campaign. As for other equipments, we'll probably see the 2-inch mortar again, we'll probably see the M1 flamethrower again, we'll probably have the Colt News Service, and we'll probably have the 1911 again, just like we have in all the other campaigns with the Americans. As for anti-tank weapons, here's where we get a little tricky, because neither the Americans nor the Japanese at this point in the war have a dedicated anti-tank rifle or a bazooka type thing. So we might see the Boys AT rifle added to this campaign, even though that's a little ahistorical, but it would work for balancing. Moving on, we've got the 1897 shotgun, the trench gun. These were used by the U.S. Marines. So we'll probably definitely see this one as a shotgun in the campaign, even though shotguns really aren't the greatest in Enlisted right now. I think in a Pacific War campaign where we have lots of bunkers and trenches and jungles, that a shotgun might actually be more feasible than on some of the more open maps that we already have in the other campaigns. So those are my ideas for the Americans. Moving on to the Japanese, this is where things get a little bit more trickier, because at this point in the war, the Japanese don't actually have a semi-automatic rifle like the Americans do. At this point, they're mostly equipped with the Type 99 Arasaka and the Type 38 Arasaka and the carbine versions of each one. There is already an Arasaka in the game. There's the Type 30 Arasaka. It's a Soviet premium squad in the Moscow campaign, so we might see that one as a repeat. But like I said, there's no semi-automatic rifles adopted by the Japanese. At this time, they had a series of experimental semi-automatic rifles, and they obviously probably captured some Garands and M1 carbines, so we might see either Japanese designated carbines or Garands, or we might see some of the ahistorical experimentals for balance. Imagine something kind of like the PPSH-41 that the Germans can get in the Stalingrad campaign. It would kind of work similar to that, as that fills a niche within the balance of that campaign. Moving on into submachine guns, the Japanese at this point do actually have quite a few submachine guns, and actually these will be a couple of repeats. They do use the MP-28, from what I read researching, and they did also use the MP-34, both two German submachine guns that we already have in the game that were purchased by the Japanese. And then in addition, they have the kind of iconic Type 100 submachine gun, which was used in small numbers by Japanese paratroopers during the Battle of Guadalcanal, so we will definitely see it return in this campaign. As for Japanese machine guns, they have the Type 99 light machine gun, which is based off of the same gun as the Bren, so it would probably handle very similar to the Bren guns we already have in game. And they also have the much older Type 96 machine gun, which will probably be their starter one. These will play pretty similar to most other machine guns we have in the game. As for heavy equipment for the Japanese, they have their own equivalent 50mm mortar, a Type 99. They have their own equivalent flamethrower, the Type 95 or Type 97. Like I said earlier, neither army really has an dedicated anti-tank rifle or rocket launcher at this point, so I don't even know if we would really even need or have a gun or a bomber, type class in this campaign. That's really up to the devs to decide. And lastly, rounding out with handguns, probably we'll definitely see the classic Nambu pistols and the Nambu revolver to fill the similar niche to their American counterparts. Rounding off the Japanese, we'd probably definitely see the katana, as that wouldn't be a Japanese campaign if we didn't see Japanese soldiers with a katana. I'd imagine it would probably be a Silver Order weapon, kind of like the shovel where you can buy it, and I would imagine probably assaulters or riflemen would come automatically equipped with them, and you could take them off of them and give them to other soldiers. It probably would function exactly like the event swords that we already have in game. As for a unique feature for this game for an engineer structure, I think it'd be really neat to see a buildable Type 89 machine gun for the Japanese and a buildable Type 17 Browning water-cooled. I'd imagine these would function pretty much identical to the machine gun nests that we already have in game, except for they would be on the ground. You would have to crouch to use them. I think this would add an interesting gameplay aspect and make the campaign a little bit more unique. Aircraft played a big role in the Pacific campaign, and we'll definitely have some aircraft in the game. You can argue in the comments about how useful aircraft are in Enlisted, but here are some of the Japanese and American aircraft that I think we'll probably end up seeing in this campaign. As most of you probably know, all the vehicle models are ripped from War Thunder, so here are some of the War Thunder models that we will see. Probably a Zero, a Ki-43, a D3A1 Val, and a Ki-45 Atsu. For the Americans, we'll probably see the F2 Buffalo, the F4F, the Banshee that we already have, and the TBF. Moving on into tanks, these are going to be an interesting one to add because of the disparity between American and Japanese tanks during the war. The American tanks are by far superior, and nobody wants to play a game where American tanks just run over the entire Japanese team. So what I found while I was reading, the three types of American tanks that were used around this time in the war were the early M2, the M3 Stuart, and lastly the M3 Lee. The Stuarts will probably play identical to the ones we already have in the Normandy campaign, and the M3 Lee will play exactly like the Grant that's in Tunisia. Japanese tanks will play a little bit different from anything we've had before. The three Japanese tanks that were used during this campaign that I found were the two different versions of the Type 97, one with a short gun and the long gun, and the Type 95 Ha-Go. That about concludes it for this video of a Enlisted Pacific campaign idea. This was my first time making a video like this, so any comments or criticisms or anything that you think I could add or change about this video, or anything you think should be added to an Enlisted Pacific campaign, more than welcome to hear about it in the comments. If you want to see more Enlisted content, I guess I could upload some of that. Thank you, and see you next time.